Hey, so welcome to As the World Works, everybody. Today, I have beside me my longtime friend Craig Gore. It's the first time I've done the split screen, but as we talked about in some of the previous episodes, the whole intent of As the World Works is having these conversations, especially now with the beginning and grassroots part of this um, series and this forum is conversations, these fireside chats with people that I know that are very close to me, that have been tremendous connections, and I've learned more about myself and the world at large. But also, this is about our external environment, our external space, and the influencers in that world. We started with, and we'll continue to have these conversations with people that I'm familiar with commercial real estate and real estate in general, but also the business community at large. And this one is really and particularly close to home because it's about the internal space and how that impacts external space and vice versa. I've known Craig for over 30 years. We met at college at Baylor. And automatically I knew this guy was different. He just didn't fit the mold of, the fraternity guy, preppy guy. He rolled in with long hair, was rolling his own vibe, and his swagger was, something that was very compelling to become friends with. And so we became fast friends. And I always knew he was a deep diver, a seeker of truth, a seeker of his own personal development. Is and was a talented artist, musician. And I went off to SMU. He goes off to California, I believe, at that point. But he's traversed back and forth from Nashville home, around the world, Los Angeles, and where we picked up was a few years later, where I was in California in Los Angeles. They call it the city of Los Angeles for a reason, because I was out there, didn't know anyone. I was walking down this street, and it's a very lonely place if you don't have friends. I remember my heart was longing for, just a buddy. And I looked down in the middle of 10, 12 million people down this outdoor corridor from this building that I was trying to go to an audition or something. And I see Craig Gore in the middle of all these people, showed up at the right time in my life. Fast forward several years, it's one of those things where you have these friends you know that are always there, and you can go years and then pick up. And so that's exactly how it happened. We picked up several years later, and his story is pretty phenomenal because he was in construction as well and left that all behind. I'll let him tell you the story, but I want to introduce my good pal, heart of a man, Craig Gore.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks for being
Thank you.
here.
Thanks for having me, dude. I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much. Sam, do you remember seeing each other in Macy's in New York City on the escalator?
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yes. Holy
Dude,
cow.
I was living in New York. And do you remember
Yes.
I was going down and you were going up, and you looked around and you were like, what the hell? No,
Yeah.
was it Macy's?
It was New York though.
I was Bergdorf's. I can't remember. But do you remember seeing each other
I
just
do
like going
now.
up that?
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's the second time. Yeah, that's how
That's
crazy.
second random time. So for sure we were supposed to know each other. And I remember the same thing about you is like remember being attracted to your presence because you have a way of being that I find very, very intriguing. So yeah, knowing you all this time. So here I am. Now I'm 53 years old. We met when we were what, 19?
Yeah.
18?
Yeah. I was 15, I think. You were 22. But yes, we were stupid young.
Totally. And you were perfectly dressed, you stud.
Yeah.
And oh yeah.
I
And
have no idea who I
yeah.
was.
And on and on it's gone since then.
Yeah.
So how can I continue the story? Would you like for me to continue the story? What?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I went back and forth I finished college and I moved directly to New York, which Sam intimidated the hell out of me. Um, and I was learning how to write songs. I spent a short time in New York that go around. I came back to Nashville and I got my first deal, as a professional singer, songwriter guy. And I moved to Los Angeles and I subsequently sort of started kind of rocking back and forth for about, I don't know, better part of a decade. I spent a little time in Philly in there making a record. And then I sort of settled in LA with my significant other at the time. And that's where I stayed from. So I was in New York living for 9/11. That happened while I was in New York. That's my dog, excuse her.
Wow,
And
bless you.
then, yeah, she has a sneeze. When she lays upside down, she sneezes, tickles her nose for some reason. So after 9/11, we decided it was time for a change. And we moved to LA I continued life there. And that's kind of where I stayed until about 3 years ago. So I was a contractor for most of that time for really fancy pants, international designers, architects, discriminating clients, the rich and the very stressed, and the high maintenance, community that they, I was a part of that whole jam.
Yeah, so
Um,
can I interject for a second?
sure.
That was what was intriguing to me is when we reconnected. At
Yeah.
that point, you had you were in construction, which was
Hmm.
like that's where I came
Well,
from, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Residential. My dad was a builder, and I built
Hmm.
homes, and so that familiarity was like, whoa! And he's doing this
Hmm.
big stuff in LA. That's where
Hmm.
you were when we picked up, really after
Hmm.
years. And so
Hmm.
you were rocking and rolling. How did you get in that world?
Uh, I wasn't making a living as a musician, Sam, a very good one. So in New York, I got hired on as a laborer for a restoring plaster company. It's three guys. The guy's name was Joe McGinnis. Excuse me. My my boss was Joe McGinnis, and I worked with him and his little brother Steve McGinnis. The three of us did plaster restoration. And in New York, there's a lot of townhouses with a lot of old school plaster, and you have to learn how to do casting and restoring. And there's a lot of paint involved, and it's like old woodwork, mahogany woodwork everywhere. So I'll try and make this brief, but Sam, the first thing that happened is I walk in and I meet this Irish dude from Queens named Joe McGinnis, and he takes a sleeve of sandpaper that's this thick, like a book of sandpaper, and he says, "Hey, follow me." So we go upstairs in the elevator in this townhouse on Fifth Avenue. We keep going. He's looking at me. He's got like this perfectly trimmed mustache, right? We get to the seventh floor. He says, "Follow me." So we walk down to the end of the hallway and he swings the door open. It's a closet. And he gives me this paper. He said, "I'll see you at lunchtime." And he turns on the light and closes the door. He said, "Don't touch the door to the closet at all. I want you to sand every surface in the closet." So I come out covered in dust. He buys me a cheeseburger. I eat it ravenously. He says, "Go back up to the closet." So I did that, Sam, for 6 months
Same
before
closet.
well, all the closets on the top floor and then
Yeah.
down and then down. And then he taught me how to prime and plaster. And then he taught me how to do finish work on walls. And then he taught me how to do finish work on trim. And I went from there to the Frick collection in New York City. And I had a really fancy pants painter job because I had an eye for restoring things. I mean, not naturally. I learned how to mix color, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm working around all these Michelangelos and Goyas and all these fancy paintings.
Wow.
So I learned to do that. And then I began to paint and plaster the patrons of the Frick collection, who are like the wealthiest of the wealthy. And I learned how to very refined sort of, very well-to-do people of the Upper East Side of New York. And I learned how to interface with them, and I learned what they liked. And I learned how to special talent for listening to them and interpreting what they're trying to say to me, give them the product that they want. So you can see how that translates. You're a contractor. So I knew how to, so I went from painting to a little bit larger projects, Then you add all the specialty carpentry. I'm adding this guy, and this guy's got to come hang a door, shift that over to New York, to LA. I turned down a big museum job at the Getty.
Wow.
And I began to do this stuff sort of like with a friend, and I worked my way up, and then finally I was a partner in a contractorship, really big house in Santa Monica Canyon. He like robbed the company blind and disappeared. So then
That guy.
that guy. He took all my money with him,
Wow.
and I had to get my contractor's license and go out on my own. And believe it or not, I passed the test, Sam. And literally, I'm driving home from the contractor's test with my little fake paper license that they printed out for me. And I got a call from a dude in Beverly Hills. And he said, I want you to redo my house. This guy's famous DJ, who I
Yeah.
won't tell you who he is.
Yeah.
But I ended up working there, bro, for like 18 months.
Holy cow. Jeez.
From there, I went to a really famous landmark hotel in Hollywood, like uber rock star, Oscar winner, famous kind of place with an owner to match. And it all kind of like spread out from there until eventually it took over my life and nearly ate me whole.
And then what happened? This is what's like, talk about bold moves and listening to your heart.
Thank you, man. I really have had the best life so far. Wow. Sam, I got to the point. So I'm standing on the top of a mountain in Colorado on vacation with my skis on, and I'm on my cell phone on a conference call. Top of the mountain, snow's blowing sideways.
You're so LA.
You'll totally understand this. My girlfriend, my significant other, who's in the other room, is standing there looking at me just like, you disgust me. And dude, we're arguing. I'm arguing with this designer and this client about doorknobs. I mean, you understand, that's the reality of the job. But here's my problem, was my relationship to it. So I really had trouble saying no or saying yes to myself. So I make a few, I'm strung out and I'm stressed. I'm not working but 6 or 7 hours a day, Sam. I mean, but I'm just the guy who gets up and just hits it hard. 6, 7 hours a day. I was making tons of money, hand over fist, and contracts were coming in. And I was just like, you know what? I told Ryan, my lady, I said, I don't like this lifestyle anymore. It just came out of my mouth. So we just decided I was going to shut the contractorship down and come to Nashville, and we were going to start everything up again, but in a different gear, in a different format. We were going to do some more design work. I was doing loads of design work at that point. So,
and you had a couple of big contracts at that moment that were sitting on your plate, right?
Yeah. I had I had big contracts. So I went to Shanghai to look at a thing, and it was like a big thing, and it was going to involve the next probably 10 or 15 years of my life. And it would have most certainly made me a wealthy, wealthy man. But Sam, I couldn't say yes.
Mm.
I, you could have fooled me because I tried. I
You were
tried
building to
to,
that, right? You're
I
building to
was
that.
built. Yeah, I had it. And same week, I went to Shanghai. I got back and got over my jet lag and had a meeting with a group of guys about building a boutique hotel in Nashville. And I couldn't
Even
say
there,
yes.
even in back in your home, like, ah.
I
So,
looked at
I mean,
I
there's a
looked at
certain part of
100
LA,
deals.
right? That's like has that
Yeah,
vibe too, right?
you're
And
right.
then you go back to Nashville. Nashville's got a super cool vibe that
Yes,
feels
it
like
does.
home because it is home, right?
Right.
And then you're doing the same thing. You're bringing that suitcase with you.
You couldn't have said it any better. So that was me. That was my story. And my whole life changed. Ryan and I got a little business together on the side called Rook and Render. We went to Mexico. We had a bunch of really amazing uh, pieces of textile made that Ryan designed by really world famous rug makers and all of this stuff. And it's all super bitchin'. And that's still alive. But it wasn't going to be something that I did the rest of my life. So fast forward to a couple of weeks later, a friend of mine who's in a Grammy award winning band, they're on tour, this big tour, they're making $1 million a month. We're sitting in my couch having a bourbon. And he's like, I don't know how we're going to stay together. Can you help me? And I said, yeah. So I listened. And then I gave him one little small piece of advice. And next thing I know, the whole freaking band is sitting in my living room like a week later. So I helped them. Then the next week, the drummer brings his wife. So these people became clients. I didn't even know what you call it, Sam. I didn't have any idea what the hell you call that because I'm certainly not a licensed counselor. I'm not a therapist. Um, I'd been doing that on the side my whole life. And it finally dawned on me like where the hell I had been. And for what this is worth, to connect to what you're saying, the context of this conversation is I began to realize that everything that I did as a contractor was about watching them transform their desires into something real. So getting the inside of my clients' wishes and desires out into physical space, which was what I did as a contractor. That's what made me so talented.
Well, and a lot of people want to jump to that, to that pinnacle
Yeah.
quicker than someone handing the apprentice the stack of sandpaper, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
you learned excellence in detail from the inside out. So that didn't just happen overnight, right? And so you said, putting that aside, I didn't know that was uh, something that I would evolve to. But as long as I've known you, you've always been working on the inside and
Yes,
listening.
sir. Yes,
So
sir.
that wasn't just a happenstance, right? That you were having a conversation in the bus that gravitated. I'm sure it was a surprise to you that was
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. Um, I mean, you're right. Thank you for the acknowledgement. But I got to tell you, I mean, we both know, Sam, you've had a pretty big, pretty beautiful life, and you've had a few layers of life in one life, have you not? So we're very
Yeah,
similar.
yeah.
And excellence is not this thing where you always do it perfect. It's not that. It's getting the shit kicked out of you. And it's not only that, but it's getting the shit kicked out of you if you'll pardon my use of
Yeah, but you're not,
the
I mean,
inappropriate.
so yeah, but you're not overtly looking for the shit to kick your
No,
ass.
no, no, no,
Except
no.
it'll
It just
come naturally, right?
right, right.
But
I
you'll
mean,
look for it. I know you're a big, you push yourself when you work out. You pay a lot of good money to get your ass kicked.
I
So
totally do.
there's
I
something
do that
you
with,
look for.
and people pay me for that as well. It's like,
Okay. Okay.
so no, I don't want to sound like I'm a glutton, but I don't want it. I don't want to present myself as like, did I have a natural talent? Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have a strong mind and I have an artistic vision, but I had to start with the rest of the guys.
Mm,
And my boss would come in and he would critique and he'd say, you see where you bore down too hard right here? We can't have this at this level. This will not happen like this in the future, or you will not work here, period. I mean, it's not like I was golden boy from the beginning. It's
right.
just, I learned how to be in that and stay with it. And I
Mm.
was still making mistakes, Sam. I was still getting my comeuppance from the guys that I was working with, even at the level that I worked at. That's the
Were you hard
nature
on
of,
yourself?
absolutely, 100%. Harder on myself than I should have been.
So when did that trigger the coming back from LA, leaving the construction sort of behind
Mhm.
the rearview mirror, and then picking up with this group that fully supported,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
this internal
right.
natural progression that you were already being.
Mhm. Mhm.
What did that light the fire for your own more internal tuning?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Wow, that's a very insightful question. I've been, if I've done anything well in my life, it has been my attention to my inner life. Some people are into that, some people are not. For me, I pay attention to what happens inside of me. It's the place of most interest. And I'm interested in what happens in the interior of other people. That's the place of most interest for me. However, when the 20, 30, $40,000 a month stops, or when you're writing $100,000 worth of checks out every month and money's flowing in to support that, or to support your business. I'm not saying I got to keep all that, but I'm just saying you can really get distracted about
Mm,
what's important. So, beautiful question. When the contracting stopped and I could not say yes, I was kind of like, well, what now? Then it turns out, coaching, which is what I am now, was just sitting right there, just waiting to come forward. But I had to pay a price for that. Um, I
you had
had,
to take the test and you got the paper, then you got the call. Driving down the road, not knowing what's next, right?
that's exactly right. And it hurt, Sam, and it scared me.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It was, I cannot tell you how beautiful it was to find out that when I chose what my heart wanted, that my life rose to meet me. I paid the price by being scared and doing it anyway, finding out what it is that I wanted to do and making my claim and moving forward. And some days, Sam, some days I'm like, I don't know, Sam, I don't know,
Yeah,
right?
right. Same.
Now, two and a half, 3 years later, I got a fistful of clients and my life is very different than it was.
You still like bourbon, cigars, and gardening.
I, who would have thunk?
I know.
Gardening.
Check
It's like,
this.
what? Tell me.
Your garden.
Oh man, I love my garden, dude. So Sam, I don't know. You stop me wherever you want. But yeah, I do love bourbon. I do love cigars. I like good tequila. I like whatever and good
You love
cigars.
life.
And I love my life. And so one of my things is I want to ranch. It took me forever to pay myself the courtesy of admitting that I wanted a ranch. That shows you how much of my life I lived by, you should be doing this and you can't do these other things. I finally, with the help of a coach, admitted to myself that I want a big old ranch, like an obscene amount of land. I do. I'm admitting it. I don't own this ranch yet. But as it turns out, I also like to grow things. Who would have thunk? So when the quarantine hit, I got this harebrained idea, right? I work from my house. My clients, I don't work that much. I'm really blessed. I don't have to work a whole bunch, and I'm well paid, and I get to live the life that I want to live. That's a beautiful thing. Have a little extra time. I make a garden. I start to grow things. It starts to teach me things. My garden is teaching me stuff, Sam, about what it's like to cultivate my life from the inside and to go with my desires and to be with myself. God.
What's the biggest revelation recently?
I'll refine this, however, to whatever degree you want me to, but here's the biggest revelation. I knew that I didn't honor myself before. I found that out. I found out that I judged myself harshly and that I was my own worst critic. And I've been working on not judging myself. But I did not realize how deeply that we go around making ourselves wrong. That I go, it's like, well, if things are slowing down, what do? I hammer because I need it to be different. If I'm uncomfortable, then it used to be my inclination to try and calm myself down instead of finding out what the discomfort was for. So,
You go in there.
oh, absolutely, 100%. So that's my realization is it's like making myself wrong has been and it's like this pervasive thing where and it's like everywhere you go, oh, well, it should be different. Well, my shoulders should be bigger. I'm 5 pounds over, I'm 10 pounds under, or my money's not where I think. And I'm constantly, there's this critic that it's like so as I go deeper into that and I realize the pressure that I put on myself, I've made a pretty good life by applying pressure, Sam. But you've got no idea how awesome, or maybe you do, I'm sure you do. I had no idea how awesome it got when I began to relax and know that everything was all right. My powers of creation multiplied by 100. And
Dr. Albert Ellis, the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, rational motive behavioral therapy, big fan of some of his writings. One of the quotes he says just reminds me of what you said: quit shitting on yourself.
That's it. Yeah, I love that. Quit shitting all over yourself. And if you're a high output person, right, Sam? You flex your muscles and you hammer forward.
Yeah.
But there are subtleties in life, Sam, that cannot be perceived when you use force.
Diving into that right now. I'm digesting that. See, for those of you watching this, I told you we were going to go to the inner space. Yeah, those nuances that you miss along the way because of all this pressure, of all this forcing. And you're right, the reactive nature of us when we get to the point where it's fearful, where it's uncertain, which is the cumulative effect of this pandemic, right? So it's palatable in the universe. And then the more you push to try to get out of it, the more resistant you become and the more anxious. So it's a vicious cycle, right? It's more fearful.
May I draw the distinction
Yes, please, yeah.
So, Sam, I've produced twice the clients that I produced in the whole of last year during the pandemic.
What do you think that
My,
is?
because I've let go.
Mm.
It's not, I'm learning to be with instead of always trying to alter things. I'm learning to be with myself and be with my life as I am. And so if I'm not trying to create like this and I relax, and I begin to let my life flow and go with my life, my powers of creation, I find are they're much broader.
So
You
you have a
follow?
coach, right? You have a coach.
I just hired a coach. I have had coaches. It's
Okay.
been about a year. I just hired another coach.
So yeah, that's interesting because
Mm.
that's a good um, self check, I guess, or a continual outsourcing of your internal work, right? Which is what you
I,
do.
yeah, I need somebody to. I choose to have somebody to run with.
There
That's
you go.
that's that's my jam.
There you go.
It's like I'm. I like to take an airplane where I'm going, so that's how I do it. Is I hire a coach.
Smart.
Yeah,
Feels right.
it does. It does for me for sure.
Tell
And
me, tell me about before we take off. Thank
mm,
you. Seriously, I mean, this I could go on for 3 or 4 hours, and we can rock and roll. So please, can we do this? Can
yeah,
we
yeah,
continue
yeah.
this?
Part two, man.
Part
Absolutely.
two. Thank you. So do you? So you coach. So how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, well, that's easy. Um, they can find me on my website, which is johncraiggore.com. There's a contact form there. They can find me on Instagram. They can find me on Facebook. And if they know you personally, I'm sure they could reach out to you and get some contact information from you
Absolutely.
if you were good enough to share it. Um, my email is my all three names at gmail.com, but no spamming, please.
Yeah.
But you can reach me at all three of my names as one big word at
John Craig
Gmail.
Gore at gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give just what you're feeling today? Me, the world, people who may be listening,
Mm-hmm.
something.
Can you tell me a little more? I mean, I'm happy to. What am I feeling?
Yeah. What are you feeling? And what is the sort of commonality of people's feelings of how you're coaching? I know everybody has different ways of approaching it, but
Well, so here what I would say is I need my life's work is not to solve problems, but to dissolve them. So here's what I want to say from that. There is nothing wrong with you.
mm,
There is only your limited concept of yourself. You are much more beautiful than you can even imagine. And if you will take the time and give yourself the attention that you deserve, the ego will tell you you don't have time because you have work and kids and money and commitments and all of these things. If you will take the time to spend with yourself and to become aware of how you are inside of yourself, it will bless you thousands of times over. And you get your outside life back in a way that is sustainable.
so
That's
you
that's my
really help people. Something I just got is you really help people not avoid the fear and not power through the fear, but acknowledge the fear and learn from
and heal.
whatever emotion that comes up. And just
Absolutely.
be
It's
with it.
all it you want to be with that, right, Sam? Because there's intelligence in it. It's happening for a reason. It's like if you're hitting yourself with a hammer, it hurts, right?
Right.
It's like you got to learn out what your hammer is. Let's find out how to put that tool down instead of like let me have more drinks or take more time off of work. That might be a shield. But
Mm.
if you can learn how to, it may not need more discipline. You may need to slow down for a second and look. And as you relax, it doesn't mean that you got to go broke or be run out of business, or it doesn't mean that you have to sit on top of a hill as a monk. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. It just means you get to feel better. And as you feel better, as within, so without. As within, so without. It works. It works. You want your best life? Turn in first.
There it is. Thank you, Craig. Hey,
Thank you,
love you,
Sam.
brother.
Love you, brother.
Talk soon.
Okay.